In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to build the ultimate 1440p AMD gaming PC for 2022, featuring their RX 6750 XT, a GPU renowned for its awesome performance at 1440p, and the brand new Ryzen 5 7600X. It's a match made in heaven. In this one, I'll be talking you through all the parts that make it possible, how to put it together step by step from start to finish, and looking at performance later, seeing how you can tweak all your settings to get the optimal frame rates, and just generally how many frames per second you can expect in all the latest titles. Let's do this. Let's begin, shall we, by taking a look at our GPU and CPU combo. The RX 6750 XT is a GPU that certainly packs some punch. Part of AMD's refresh, where they actually released a new version of the 6600 XT called the 6650, this which is an update to the 6700 XT, and then also the 6950 XT, is a card that really punches back against the competition in providing great gaming performance. 12GB of VRAM is also at the market leading edge when it comes to GPU memory, allowing for some great performance in a wide range of titles. When paired with an AMD CPU, in this case the Ryzen 5 7600X, you also get access to smart access memory, whereby the CPU can use your GPU's VRAM, making that 12GB very useful. The 7600X is a brand new chip we recently reviewed, and it comes with the fastest single-threaded performance of basically any CPU on the market. We recently conducted some graph tests, and you'll see here the performance is pretty top tier. It even beats out more expensive chips with its very high clock speeds, as AMD ushers in a new gen of CPUs with Ryzen 7000. Now, of course, for this processor, we need a new X670 motherboard of which to install it in. And for that, I've picked up the Aorus X670 Elite from Gigabyte. This is the AX model, meaning you get Wi-Fi integrated as standard, and runs on the X670 chipset. You might notice that we've gone for this rather than X670E option, and that's because our 6750 XT GPU doesn't need the advantage of PCI Gen 5, so we can save ourselves a bit of cash and still go for what is a cracking motherboard. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not cheap, but it's going to be a really great bet for the build today. A quick rundown of the features, and you'll see that you still retain PCI Gen 5 for your SSD. We've got DDR5 memory slots over on the right hand side of the board. You'll also find your M.2 Gen 4 slots under this heatsink, with plenty of connectivity in terms of USB-C, USB 3, USB 2, got everything we could possibly want. The I.O. is also pretty good. You got Wi-Fi 6, USB 2, USB 3, Gen 2, and then of course your latest super fast USB-C ports as well. 20 gigabits per second on one of them. So really class-leading performance. As I say, you can see a full review of this over on the website, alongside our X670 motherboard buyer's guide. When installing these new Ryzen chips, you've got to be a little bit careful, as the new socket pin design does mean you can damage the motherboard if not done correctly. But don't worry, take it slow, watch this video a couple of times over, and you're going to be good to go. Let's go ahead and pop the processor in. The Ryzen tech should be facing the right way around, with the triangle in the top left corner. Make sure you just seat it gently and correctly in the first instance. You can give it a tiny wiggle to make sure it's in properly, and then pop the cover down. Add in the retention arm, and the black plastic socket cover will automatically pop off. No need to remove this beforehand. Once the CPU's in, we then next need to install the memory. I've gone for this Corsair Vengeance RGB DDR5 EXPO kit. EXPO, of course, is the new overclocking RAM profiles for AM5, and it's important you get a compatible kit, as that can really help with performance. New DDR5 memory is coming down in latency, which is good news. There's still some work for brands to do, but as the number of units being sold increases, the price and the availability of units like this should only get better. We're going to pull back the clips on the motherboard RAM DIMM slots, so the second and fourth in our instance, and slide it into place. Make sure that the Vengeance text, that's this one here, is pointing away from the CPU, and that will ensure you can go ahead and install it without too many problems. While we're here, we're also going to pop in the SSD. This is the Samsung SSD 980. Now, this is only a Gen 3 drive, which is perfectly fine for what we're doing, and still has read speeds of up to 3.5 gigabytes per second. I said this in a couple of videos, but I wouldn't use the top slot. Normally I would, but because it's not a Gen 5 drive, there's no need. Add it into one of your lower ones, and then if you did pick up a Gen 5 drive, even in like 2 years' time, you haven't got to worry about swapping SSDs, relinking them up in Windows. It's a nightmare waiting to happen. happen to take this off and pop our drive in there instead. With that done, we're basically there on our motherboard and there's not much more we can install. There is one thing though I am going to check, and that's that our CPU cooler doesn't need too much prep by way of installation. If it does need prep, we can do that to the motherboard now while it's still easy to access. So let me dig into our box of brackets and instructions and see what on earth is going on, shall we? I should probably mention, this is the Aorus Waterforce X240. I think it fits perfectly with our Gigabyte and AMD theme today. Oh yes, look at that. It's even got a screen on it, which is going to allow you to display cool information and facts about your PC, like CPU or GPU temperature. A quick look at the manual, and it turns out there is actually some prep for us to do. If you take a look at this diagram here, you can see we need to remove the stock hardware and just add 4 bolts on for AMD. The rest we'll be doing later, but we might as well do this now. As I say, way easier to access, and it's going to save you a lot of hassle factor. Looking at the screws, it's just these ones here. To take your motherboard, remove those black plastic brackets, and then add these onto the top. And these will allow us to fasten in that cooler in the next stage of the build. For now, we're going to go ahead and move this into the case. For this build, I've picked up the NZXT H7 Flow. Now, the H7 Flow is available in a few different colorways. I've gone for the all black version, but there's an all white and a white and black option available that you can pick up. If we go ahead and unbox it, you should be able to tell that it looks absolutely awesome. You've definitely got to fill it out with some RGB fans and radiators, but don't worry about that. We've got that covered, as you'd expect here on the channel. Before we do that though, we need to strip the whole thing down. Take off all of the side panels, the top panel. We're also going to remove our front panel. If I can get in where's the front panel? Yes! The glass panel as well. I think there's like a little pull tab. There is indeed. And the rear panel too for good measure. If that's gonna pop off, yes. Before proceeding to lay the case down flat on the table. Now what we need to do at this stage is we need to go ahead and grab the motherboard and just locate all of the standoff holes on the underside. That's the holes that go straight through and have these little contact pins around them. You'll notice we've got 3 at the top, 3 along the middle of the board, and 3 down the bottom. And these need to match up with the 9 in the case. Now taking a look, there's 2 at the top. They look like they're in the right locations, but there's certainly 1 missing here. 3 along the middle and 3 down the bottom all look a-okay to me. So I'm not sure where that extra one's gone. So I'm going to go ahead and replenish that and then slide the motherboard in, popping the I/O through the rear rectangle at the back and tightening the whole thing into place. Nice and simple, nice and easy, and it's going to secure the motherboard down. We're then able to move on and actually do the installation of the cooler. For this, we need to go ahead and pop the fans on the cooler first, as these will be on the underside, pulling air through the radiator, and then we can install the completed radiator assembly, if you will, onto the top of the chassis. Awesome! So now we can go ahead and pop the GPU in. Now, this is the AMD Radeon Design 6750 XT. It's straight from AMD themselves, and I've always been quite a big fan, actually, of these GPUs. Now, believe it or not, we're actually going to be giving away this GPU. You can learn how to win at the links down below. It looks sick. It's an opportunity you simply do not want to miss. Really great chance to get hands-on with what is an awesome 1440p GPU. But we'll be looking at some benchmarks and other details in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Now, with this RX 6750 XT, you of course gain access to a few key pieces of software. Whether it's the Radeon software for Windows, which you can install to capture gameplay with very minimal performance overhead, or use to optimize your settings and monitor hardware, to the inclusion of AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution tech and Smart Access Memory. Now, Smart Access Memory is a particularly cool one because it allows the CPU to leverage the GPU's memory, as we talked about earlier. Why is that important or valuable? Well, your GPU uses very quick GDDR6 memory, and having access to this gives, of course, a good performance upside, up to about 15% in some titles too. Fidelity FX Super Resolution is something we'll explore in the gaming benchmark section, but in short, it's an open source resolution scaler that's supported in more than 110 games already and allows you to get a supercharged level of frame rate. You can definitely gain some really juicy FPS by doing this, and having it included with support for so many games is a major advantage. For now, let's push back the clip on the retention slot like so, and then slide the GPU. There's a cover. Take the cover off. Then we can slide the GPU into place. Oh yes. Bit of pressure to click it in, and that black aesthetic actually looks killer. I didn't realise it was so dark as a card. The other card, the 6800 XT I had, was like a silver and black and a bit of red. This blends in with our theme very nicely. Some red RGB on the fans, some red RGB fans up front, and we're going to be all good to go. Let's get that screwed in, make sure it's not going to go anywhere, and finish things off with our final component, the power supply. This is the NZXT C750. It's got an 80+ gold certification, it's fully fully modular. It's basically everything you could want in a power supply and more. NZXT have been on fire recently, not literally, bad joke, I'm sorry. And this power supply is a prime example. Definitely a unit that's on fire metaphorically. There's no physical flames coming out of the C750. It is a great power supply though. It's going to also provide us a bit of leverage for future upgrades. You're not going to be whacking a 4090 in here anytime soon. But if you did decide to go for an AMD 6800 XT or 6900 XT even, you might just about have enough mileage. So good to see a bit of upgradability here to kind of help future-proof you for the future. I hate using the word future-proof. You can't guarantee that something like this will be good in 2 years because frankly, no one knows what's coming. But you can at least give yourself a pretty good chance. We're going to go ahead and whack in all of our power supply cables. I'm having a struggle. Let's try that again. We're going to go ahead and whack in all of our power supply cables, including our motherboard cable, CPU and GPU connections, screw it into the back of the case and plug them all up to the system before finally booting things up to see how good they look. To finish things off, I'm then going to pop a couple of RGB fans in the front and add all of our panels back on before booting it up to see just how good it performs and how good it looks when everything is lit up, hopefully like a bit of a Christmas tree. The first game we're going to try out is a bit of Formula 1 2022. At 1440p using the ultra high preset, we achieved over 150 FPS on average, 159 to be precise. The game looked very playable, very smooth, but I couldn't help but feel like we could push it that bit further. Enabling AMD's FSR technology and setting this to quality, that stands for Fidelity FX Super Resolution for those wondering, and our frame rate catapulted up to 228 frames per second on average. 1440p then is easily a stomping ground for our 6750 XT, with the build looking awesome here. It was a similar story in Spider-Man where at 1440p high settings, with FSR once again set to quality, we pulled in 142 frames per second on average. This was around 35 FPS higher than with FSR disabled, and great to see the card perform just so well here. In Battlefield 2042 we once again tested, you guessed it, with AMD's Super Resolution technology. Here using the Super Resolution tech to 4K but at 1440p native, we pulled in an impressive 80 FPS on average. 80 frames per second in 4K gaming at a build of this price point is very impressive and shows the performance nous of our 6750 XT. Moving on through to our first person shooters, Apex Legends next up, and here we tested at 1440p high settings. We managed to pull in 192 frames per second on average, which was really solid, and really pushed the boundaries towards that 200 frames per second mark. It was a similarly positive story in Valorant, where next up we also tested at 1440p high. This time we managed to surpass the 400 frames per second mark, wow, in a game that undoubtedly looked incredible at 1440p, performing very smoothly indeed. Finally, we also tested out a bit of Fortnite, 1080p competitive settings, where we tuned everything down to low except the render distance, and here we pulled in over 200 FPS. Not just Valorant then that's able to deliver us those super high frame rates. With 223 FPS on average, you're sure to gain a competitive advantage with these frame rates in Fortnite. You can learn more about all the parts mentioned today at the affiliate links below. Make sure to get subscribed to the channel for more PC builds. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.